And now I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Thank you. I have been somewhat disappointed at the music as it is re-recorded through the telephone. And, of course, the telephone has a very small frequency response, and that is understandable. Just recently, I got the new calendar, and with it, I got one of the new DVDs. And I put that on the stereo, and the music was outstanding. It was just a thrill to hear the songs by Faith and Peter as they were sung, and it was just outstanding. I am ever so grateful for such a thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hello, good evening. Tonight I would like to share a wonderful protection that happened yesterday in our 8-degree Fahrenheit temperature. Very early in the morning, I learned that we had frozen pipes in part of the house. I immediately prayed about home, and our home is first in God. Sometime later, I was told that the pipes were no longer frozen, but were open to a drizzle since it was still so cold outside. In the early afternoon, when two of us should have been other places, but we were home due to a schedule change, I heard yelling. The pipe had burst and water was gushing everywhere. Between the two of us, the correct shut-off valves were found and closed. Had we not been home, the water could have gushed for many, many hours. Also amazing was how quickly everything dried. I am grateful to God for His protection and having us in our right place at all times. I am grateful to Christ Jesus, who taught us to love God first and to love our neighbors. I am grateful to Mrs. Eddy, who taught us to follow the Christ and pray to the adorable one. Lastly, I am grateful to Plainfield Church and how everyone here teaches us all these truths. Learn from science and health with key to the Scriptures and the Bible, the Word of God. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom from Iowa, go ahead.
I had a problem with hearing voices, and with practitioner help and also some tools she gave me and teaching me how to fight it, because I had to do that, it's been healed. And I can't be grateful enough for that healing. More freedom and being able to think better, more logically and reasonably, because it seemed like my intelligence was obstructed. So I'm very grateful for that healing. I think I show it more with my actions and what I say, but I also am grateful for practitioner help, like I said, and also the hymns, and also for being a member of this church. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the beautiful service tonight in the readings. A few months ago, I had the symptoms of a cold. At one point, breathing became more restricted. I mentioned this to my Plainfield practitioner. She was at the time working with me to make Christian Science practical in my daily life by living biblical principles also found in Jesus and Mary Baker Eddy's teachings. At the time, I was overwhelmed by many demands and changes at work. She was helping me to heal the tendency that I have to be very reactive to my environment, either going into overdrive or to shut down. She continually reminds me that the only pressure is to come out from the material world and be separate. You can find that statement in Science and Health, page 450. She is teaching me to be aware of what is driving me. I am encouraged to write down passages from our weekly lesson on paper and use them during the day. and to commit them to my memory. The upsetness was being replaced by calm as I began to feel and trust God's care. I started and am starting to realize that I wasn't a victim of circumstance, and I certainly could choose my thoughts. In 3 days, the breathing was normal, although improvement had started the very first day that I mentioned it to her, and the cold symptoms left and my strength and activity came back. I am learning it's not spiritually normal to be driven by anything but God, and that I don't have to accept reactivity as who I am, but to let God work in my life to be who He created me to be. Thank you very much, Plainfield. I'm very grateful for practitioner support, for Jesus, Mary Baker Eddy, and her writings. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Lil.
I was just remembering today something really wonderful that happened a few years ago. Where I live, there are large dumpsters for trash, which are surrounded by high wooden walls, 6 to 7 feet high. I went in one day, and the gate closed behind me, locking me in. I couldn't open that gate, nor another one that was on another side. Just as I was trying to figure out how I can climb out of this area, I saw somebody coming with some trash to be tossed. I just knew that was God in action. And He was there, and He let me out. It was no accident. And it taught me to be alert and to be more aware of my surroundings. The neighbor also said that the same thing happened to someone else the same day. So I immediately went up and notified the management office, and the next day it was fixed so that anyone could unlatch the gate from inside. I just thank God for always being with us, caring for us, and just loving us so much. And thank you for the wonderful readings.
Thank you. Fairly from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you for the beautiful reading. I want to express my gratitude for all I have learned at Plainfield in the past few years. For example, the first year I faced the onset of a head cold, and my practitioner referred me to an article in Mary Baker Eddy's miscellaneous writings, I've Got Cold. When the child Mrs. Eddy speaks about says to the doctor, I've got cold, Mrs. Eddy points out, what if that sweet child, so bravely confessing that she had something that she ought not to have and which Mama thought must be gotten rid of, had been taught to value the value of saying even more bravely and believing in it, I have not got cold. I tried to work with that, but at that time I still had a persistent cold that actually lasted longer than usual. The same thing happened the next year. But the third year, when I began to have unpleasant drainage in my nose, I looked up the article and read it. This time, when I simply stated, I have not got cold, and persisted in that, the symptoms soon stopped, never developing into a cold. This year, there are not even symptoms, thanks, I believe, to the clearer understanding of my spiritual selfhood that I am gaining at Plainfield. I am always very grateful for this to God, to Mrs. Eddy, and to my practitioner.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I am so grateful tonight for all that God has given me. As a member of this church, I always feel like I am receiving so much more than I am giving back. As most of you know, we have been introducing a new site this week, and I truly appreciate everyone's patience with this process. Last year, knowing that this was going to be coming up, the following words came to me, and I refer to them often to make sure that every change is made for the right reason. PlainfieldCS.com and each of its components are spiritual ideas. As such, they are of God and thus good. Because they are from divine love, they offer the support needed. I'm grateful for daily practitioner support and every week's lesson throughout this whole time. It is profound the amount of change I have had to go through in order to be ready for this work. I can actually look back and see so much that started even before I came to Plainfield. It is wonderful to have this proof that God is always working in our lives. Something occurred to me yesterday. I remember being told years ago that I was prone to getting lost in my work. Now, here in Plainfield, I realize I am not lost in the work, but found in it. To have purpose is the most wonderful blessing, and I pray every day to do my part to be worthy of it. Thank you. And now also, I have a testimony that Joseph from Scotland sent in.
Hi, this is Joseph from Barcelona. I'm very grateful today for the weekly Bible lesson, the subject of sacrament this week. As you know, I live here in Barcelona, which is a Catholic country, and all of the churches here have what they call the sacrament as the front piece of the altar. People who approach it have to genuflect or bow, and it's kept locked in a box at all times. It's produced to give to the people once a week, and even then they're not allowed to handle it or touch it, except to receive it and eat it immediately. It's a very different idea from what we have in Christian Science, where the sacrament is something which is always accessible and is always blessing humanity. This is something that I still struggle with. Those of us who come from a Catholic background, who are Catholic or ex-Catholic like me, automatically when we go into a Catholic church we look for God in the box, and it's very easy to forget that God is with us always. And I just really wanted to give thanks for the knowledge that God for us is not someone who has a material personality reproduced in blood and wine and locked away in a box. In this week's Bible lesson, one of the readings from Science and Health by Mary Baker Eddy tells us the true sense is spiritually lost if the sacrament is confined to the use of bread and wine. The disciples had eaten, yet Jesus prayed and gave them bread. This would have been foolish in a literal sense, but in its spiritual signification it was natural and beautiful. Jesus prayed, he withdrew from the material senses to refresh his heart with spiritual views. That's from this week's Bible lesson. And indeed that's a very different thing from the material senses being excited by something in a metal box which is kept under lock and key. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you to both of you. This is Bruce, and I'm very thankful for our website, and especially its new look. And I had a chance to spend some time on it yesterday, as it ends up. And on our carousel is our newsletter from the month of December. So I started reading it again, and I got hung up on the third page where it says the nightly prayer, the evening prayer. And I read it and reread it, and it went on to say that before you go to sleep, to examine your thinking to make sure that there's nothing that's unlike God in it. Cast out all your fears. Put yourself entirely in His care. And this prayer goes on and was just wonderful. Well, last night I went to bed and fell asleep pretty quickly, and I slept all the way until 8:30 this morning, which for me is almost unheard of. So I'm very thankful for the peace that gave, and the sense of God's presence and power and His care for each and every one of us. Carol.
There was a statement in last week's lesson that I still can't get over. It was, the beautiful, good, and pure constitute our ancestry. I had been lately thinking of perhaps I had inherited something from my mother. Well, if the beautiful, good, and pure is my ancestry, where did it come from? And then also I realized my mother's ancestry is the beautiful, good, and the pure. And her family's all the way back. So where did error come from? Where did any defect or anything that could go wrong, where does it come from? From nowhere. It's just error. It's just suggestion. And I thought how well that goes along with Jesus' statement, call no man your father. One is your Father, which is in heaven. That's the beautiful, good, and pure. I just am so very grateful for that statement because it totally wiped out any fear or any thought about the past. I am so grateful for this lesson and grateful for this week's as well. The lessons always, they have such wonderful things in them that just blossom in our thought, and I'm just so very grateful for it, and very grateful for practitioner help. That has been very helpful for me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig.
Great. Thanks for the new mobile site that we have. Bringing up our site on my phone, it just kept me occupied and so interested in all the articles as they scrolled by, and I had an opportunity to choose what I wanted to look deeper into, and then if I went by too fast, I could bring it back to where I want to be and go into it. It was really a lot of fun and interesting and enlightening. So it's a great way if a person's on a train or a bus or anywhere, they could just they can have a wonderful experience. It's so rich, so full, and you don't find people so much carrying a big desktop or a laptop or something like that in like every situation, but God's knowledge is just even more convenient now, and I thank Jeremy for the work that he did on that and all the other people involved.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you. In our December newsletter, we were encouraged to, quote, transform Christmas into a most holy day rather than another holiday, and listed to study Mrs. Eddy's writings on Christmas. Last week I mentioned the joy of attending this church on Christmas Eve. I'd like to share an experience that went along with that visit. I had spoken to a practitioner in this church about coming to New Jersey. We are always encouraged to do more study and prayer, not less, when traveling, and know that Christ goes before us. During our road trip, the Bible lesson was studied along with all of Mrs. Eddy's writings on Christmas, which were listed in our newsletter. Even though the conditions during our over 8-hour trip were rainy and foggy, there was never a slow-up, an incident, nor did we witness any accidents or other people having any trouble at all. When we stopped for lunch, even though the restaurant was very busy, we got our food right away. While we were eating, a whole busload of students arrived. So when we were ready to leave, I thought I wouldn't even try to use the restroom, as the line would be so long. But when I went to the restroom, not a single person was there. There were many incidents of protection and harmony on this trip, with things going smoothly and having just what we needed when we needed it. There were opportunities to bless others. And I'm so glad to be learning more and more in this independent church through regular, consistent prayer and the watches that we have, that our only purpose is to glorify God and to bless others. There's a prayer in Miscellany by Mary Baker Eddy that I love, which says in part, keep your minds so filled with truth and love that sin, disease, and death cannot enter them. It is plain that nothing can be added to the mind already full. There's no door through which evil can enter, and no space for evil to fill in a mind filled with goodness. Good thoughts are an impervious armor. Clad therewith, you are completely shielded from the attacks of error of every sort. And not only yourselves are safe, but all whom your thoughts rest upon are thereby benefited. Thank you for the inspired readings tonight, for every single testimony, and the very beautiful music.
Thank you. Sharon.
I'm grateful for the round tables. Last week in the lesson was the definition of God found in the glossary of Science and Health. And a practitioner says she works with that daily. And I thought, that's a good idea. I'm going to start doing it. So Monday morning, I started working with it and everything. And I worked with it throughout the day. And today I was given a big project. And before I started it, I remembered that it says that God is all-knowing. And I thought, well, God's all-knowing, and as his reflection, I'm all-knowing, and I can demonstrate how to do this project. Well, I did it, and it went so quickly. My boss thought it would take me about 6 hours, and I had it done in less than 3. I am just so grateful for what I'm learning at the round table and the Bible studies, and for the practitioner who is always willing to share the blessings she has learned, that we can use them also. This is such a wonderful place to be, and I'm just so grateful to be here, and to Mrs. Eddy for giving us this religion, and thank you for the readings.
Thank you. Gary.
I'm in awe at how well God is taking care of this church. I've been here for many years, and whatever this church needs to do God's will, God has provided. When we've needed readers, God has provided excellent readers. When we've needed musicians, God has provided excellent musicians. And they all love to do what they do. And when we needed a website, well, God provided somebody who could build a website for us. And he loved to do it. And when we needed a new website recently, God provided Jeremy, who loves to do what he does. Everybody who works for this church, whatever their capacity, loves to do what they do. And that's why it all works so well. God has brought people here who love to do what they do for God. And that's why we love to be here. I'm so grateful to be here and to be part of this wonderful mission.
Thank you. Mary.
I have a few things to read tonight from our website bulletin board. 2 from Pennsylvania. The first one, thank you, George, and all for your shares during the roundtable about parenting. There were many things I needed to hear, and I'm sure it will bless many. And then also, I would like to thank all the testifiers at the Wednesday evening services, and also thank Jeremy, who makes these testimonies so easy to find and listen to after the service on our website. I find myself going back to the testimonies for support with my prayers and watches, as well as for comfort to help with right thinking. Thank you all. And then a short note from Georgia. Plainfield, thank you. You are a beacon of love for the world. And then California, please share my thanks to everyone who does something to make the services, watches, roundtables, Bible studies, and the publications, etc. happen, and so well. All are very much appreciated. I'd like to say how grateful I am for those beautiful readings tonight. Years ago, a practitioner had given me that verse that was read about having your expectation from the Lord, because at that time I had a very negative expectation, and the slightest little thing could happen, and it would be like a galloping horse. I would begin to envision the worst scenarios coming down the road. And did that help anything? Absolutely not. And so the practitioner, seeing this in me, she said, why are you expecting all these bad things to happen? Why do you expect the worst to happen? And she said I was to work with that verse every day, to have my expectation from the Lord. So what does that mean? If your expectation is from God, you will expect the best. You will expect things to work out. If something perhaps unfortunate did happen, you're not going to think about, oh, well, it's just going to get worse. No, God will help you in this. God will turn this situation around. There's a right answer, and you'll find it. And with God, all things are possible. At first, this was a very difficult exercise for me because I had been in this habit of this negative thinking, and I had to persist and be consistent. And as I did that, my expectation more and more was from the Lord, and things worked out much better and much more quickly and harmoniously because I was expecting them to. We build our own walls and we shut out God's goodness when we are having these negative conversations with ourselves. So that beautiful reading about expectation from God, and then that beautiful story about the Shunammite woman who would not take no for an answer. She kept knowing that God would give her the answer and her son would be saved, and he was. We should all have that faith. I'm so grateful to be learning this in Christian Science. There's nothing too big for God, and he's right here with us every moment of every day. So grateful for also the beautiful music tonight, and thank God for our website. And Jeremy's been working on this for months and praying through every detail so that we would bring it up to the modern age, shall we say, and we can access it on all our cell phones and in other ways and keep it clean and user-friendly. I'm so grateful to see God working in our church.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to add tonight that I am so grateful for the emphasis on humility in this church, because prior to coming here, when things didn't go right, I would question God, and that kind of thinking really led to other wrong thoughts coming in, and I would condemn myself and so on. So it's so important, and I'm so grateful that I've learned this here, that we remain humbly trusting God, and as has already been said, expecting good, because we know that only good comes from God. I'm so grateful for everything I've learned here, grateful for the testimonies, the readings, which is one of my favorite stories, because it really does open the way. It just shines a light that God is always at hand. And it's amazing when we stay single-minded, looking to some of the things that have happened in our lives, and to stay humbly grateful always for everything that God has done. Grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you.